My wife said, "If you were a real man, you wouldn't question where I go." The words hung in our kitchen like smoke from burnt toast, acrid and impossible to ignore. I stood there holding my coffee mug, watching Celeste apply lipstick with the precision of a surgeon preparing for an operation. Red lipstick. The expensive kind that costs more than most people spend on groceries. "I'm not questioning," I said, keeping my voice level. "I'm observing." She turned from the hallway mirror, her blonde hair perfectly styled, despite claiming she'd rolled out of bed 20 minutes ago. Celeste had always been beautiful in that calculated way that required 2 hours of preparation to look effortless. After 16 years of marriage, I could read the signs like a contractor reading blueprints. Observing what, exactly? Her tone carried that familiar edge, sharp enough to cut glass. That you've had 12 girls' nights in the past month. That your phone buzzes at midnight with messages you don't answer in front of me. That you bought new lingerie last week and I haven't seen it. The lipstick tube snapped shut with a metallic click. There it is. The interrogation. Real men trust their wives, Nathaniel. They don't keep scorecards. Nathaniel. She only used my full name when she wanted to make me feel small. Most people called me Nate. My employees called me Mr. Ashford. My children called me Dad. But Celeste had weaponized my given name, turning it into a tool of diminishment. "Real men," I repeated, tasting the phrase. "Tell me, Celeste, what exactly does a real man do when his wife disappears 3 nights a week without explanation?" She grabbed her purse from the counter, the designer bag I'd bought her for our anniversary, the anniversary she'd forgotten until I mentioned it. A real man focuses on his own life instead of micromanaging mine. "And where are you focusing tonight?" The question hung between us like a challenge. Celeste's jaw tightened almost imperceptibly, a tell I'd learned to recognize over the years. She was calculating, weighing her response. "Dinner with Sierra and Tara. We're discussing the charity auction. Sierra Martinez and Tara Hoffman, her work friends from Weston Consulting Group. I knew them well enough to know they gossiped like teenagers and drank like sailors. They were also the type of women who'd cover for each other's indiscretions without blinking." "Which restaurant?" "Does it matter?" "It might." She slung her purse over her shoulder with more force than necessary. "Chez Laurent, downtown. Reservations at 8. Would you like me to send you photos of my meal for verification?" The sarcasm dripped from her words like honey from a broken jar, sweet and sticky, and impossible to clean up. "That won't be necessary." "Good, because I'm already running late, thanks to this conversation." She moved toward the door, her heels clicking against our hardwood floors I'd personally selected and installed when we'd renovated the house 5 years ago, back when we still made decisions together. "Celeste." She paused at the threshold, not turning around. "What?" "Have a good time." "I will." The door closed behind her with a soft thud, leaving me alone in our kitchen with my cooling coffee and the lingering scent of her perfume. Chanel No. 5. The same fragrance she'd worn on our first date, when she was 22 and I was 24 and we thought we had forever figured out. I pulled out my phone and opened the browser, typing in Chez Laurent's website. According to their reservation system, they were fully booked tonight. Had been for 3 weeks. Either Celeste had connections I didn't know about, or she was lying. I suspected the latter. My phone buzzed with a text from my daughter Kara. "Dad, can you help me with algebra tonight? Mom said she'd be out late again." Again. Even our 13-year-old had noticed the pattern. I texted back, "Of course, I'll be up in a minute." Setting my mug in the sink, I climbed the stairs to find Kara sprawled across her bed, with textbooks scattered around her like fallen leaves. She looked up when I entered, her dark eyes serious behind wire-rimmed glasses. "Where does Mom go all the time?" she asked without preamble. Kara had inherited my directness along with Celeste's intelligence. It made for a formidable combination in a teenager. She's having dinner with friends. Sierra and Tara? That's what she said. Kara's expression suggested she found this as believable as I did. They were at the mall this afternoon. I saw them when Emma's mom dropped us off. They didn't mention dinner plans. My daughter, the accidental detective. I sat down on the edge of her bed, careful not to disturb her homework. Maybe they made plans later. Maybe. She didn't sound convinced. Dad, are you and Mom getting divorced? The question hit me like a punch to the solar plexus. Direct and unexpected and perfectly aimed. Why would you ask that? Because you barely talk to each other anymore. And when you do, it sounds like you're reading from a script. Plus, Mom's been acting weird for months. Weird. That was one way to put it. I might have chosen words like distant, secretive, or hostile, but weird worked too. Marriage is complicated, kiddo. Sometimes adults go through rough patches. Is that what this is? A rough patch? I looked at my daughter, really looked at her. She had Celeste's bone structure but my stubborn chin. She was smart enough to see through comfortable lies and old enough to deserve better than platitudes. I don't know, I admitted. But whatever happens, your mom and I both love you and Benji. That won't change. She nodded solemnly, then picked up her pencil. Okay, now can you explain why X always has to equal something? Why can't X just be X? I laughed despite everything. Because mathematicians like to complicate things, just like everyone else. We worked through her algebra problems for an hour, finding comfort in equations that actually had solutions. Unlike real life, math problems came with clear answers. You could check your work and know definitively whether you were right or wrong. When Kara finally understood quadratic equations, I went to check on Benji. My 16-year-old son was in his room, headphones on, staring at his computer screen with the intense focus he usually reserved for video games. But when I looked closer, I saw he was working on a coding project. I tapped his shoulder, and he pulled off his headphones. How's it going? I asked. Good. I'm building an app that tracks location data for a school project. What kind of location data? Just basic stuff. Where someone goes, how long they stay, patterns of movement. It's actually pretty simple once you understand the GPS protocols. My son, the unintentional surveillance expert. I wondered if this was coincidence or if he'd picked up on the same undercurrents that had Kara asking about divorce. Sounds complex to me. Not really. Most people don't realize how much information their phones broadcast. Location services, Wi-Fi connections, Bluetooth pings. If you know what to look for, you can track someone's movements pretty accurately. That seems like an invasion of privacy. Benji shrugged. Only if they don't know you're doing it, but the data's already being collected anyway. Google, Apple, Facebook, they all track location. I'm just learning how it works. I sat down in his desk chair, processing this information. Could someone use that kind of tracking without the other person knowing? Definitely. There are apps that run in the background, completely invisible. Parents use them to monitor their kids all the time. Some people use them to keep tabs on their spouses. The way he said it made me wonder if he was trying to tell me something without actually saying it. Is that ethical? Depends on the situation, I guess. If someone's lying to you, maybe they forfeit their right to privacy. My son, the accidental philosopher. I ruffled his hair, which earned me an eye roll. Don't stay up too late with that project. I won't, Dad. Yeah? Mom's been acting strange lately. Just thought you should know. So both kids had noticed. That meant either I was paranoid, or Celeste's behavior had become obvious enough for teenagers to detect. Given their usual self-absorption, I suspected the latter. Thanks for telling me. I left Benji to his coding and went downstairs to my home office. The room had always been my sanctuary, filled with books on electrical engineering, business management, and military history. The walls displayed my various certifications and awards from the Electrical Contractors Association. Photos from job sites where my company had completed major projects, evidence of a life built through hard work and careful planning. I pulled out my laptop and opened my email. 3 new messages from job sites, 2 from suppliers, and 1 from my business partner asking about next week's bid presentation. Normal stuff. The kind of problems that had clear solutions and measurable outcomes, unlike my marriage. I leaned back in my chair and tried to think objectively about my situation. Celeste's behavior had changed dramatically over the past 6 months. The late nights had started gradually, maybe once a week, then twice. Now it was almost every other day. She'd become protective of her phone, taking it with her to the bathroom and sleeping with it under her pillow. She'd started working out more, buying new clothes, paying more attention to her appearance. All classic signs of an affair, according to every article I'd ever read on the subject. But knowing something and proving it were different things entirely. And even if I could prove it, what then? Confrontation? Counseling? Divorce? My phone buzzed with a text from Celeste. "Dinner running late. Don't wait up." It was 9:47 p.m. Either Chez Laurent served very slow food, or she wasn't at Chez Laurent. I opened my laptop's browser and navigated to the restaurant's website again. This time I clicked on their social media links. Their Instagram account showed photos from tonight's service. I scrolled through images of perfectly plated dishes and candid shots of diners. No sign of Celeste, Sierra, or Tara. Of course, that didn't prove anything. They could have requested privacy or simply avoided the photographer. But combined with everything else, it added another piece to a puzzle I didn't want to solve. My phone rang. The caller ID showed my business partner's name, Douglas Whitmore. "Nate, sorry to call so late. I just got off the phone with Margaret from HR. We might have a problem with the Weston account." Douglas had been my partner for 8 years, ever since I'd bought out the previous owner of Ashford Electrical. He handled the legal and financial side while I managed operations and client relationships. He was also one of the few people who knew about my complicated corporate structure. "What kind of problem?" "Nothing major, just some questions about billing procedures. Margaret thinks we should schedule a meeting with their management team next week." Margaret Sinclair ran human resources for our holding company. She was thorough, discreet, and had an encyclopedic knowledge of corporate regulations. If she wanted a meeting, there was a good reason. "Which management team?" Weston has 3 divisions. "The consulting group. Margaret specifically mentioned wanting to discuss their personnel policies." Weston Consulting Group. Where Celeste worked. Where she'd been employed for the past 4 years, ever since she'd decided that being a full-time mother wasn't fulfilling enough. "Any particular reason for the sudden interest in their personnel policies?" Douglas paused, and I could hear papers shuffling in the background. "Margaret mentioned some irregularities in their expense reports. Nothing criminal, just sloppy bookkeeping. She wants to make sure we're not liable for any compliance issues." "I see. There's something else. Margaret asked me to remind you about the ownership disclosure requirements. Apparently, some employees might not be aware of our corporate relationship with Weston." I sat up straighter. "Meaning?" "Meaning your wife might not know you own the company she works for." The silence stretched between us like a taut wire. Douglas was right, of course. When I'd acquired Weston Consulting Group 3 years ago, I'd done it through a series of shell companies and holding corporations. The paperwork was buried so deep that even most of the executives didn't know the ultimate ownership structure. I'd told myself it was just good business practice, maintaining operational independence while ensuring strategic control. But now I wondered if I'd been unconsciously preparing for this moment. "Nate, you still there?" "I'm here. Schedule the meeting with Margaret." "And Douglas?" "Yeah." "Make sure all the ownership documentation is current and properly filed." "Will do. Everything okay?" I looked around my office, at the photos of successful projects and the certificates of achievement. Evidence of a man who planned carefully and executed precisely. A man who built things that lasted. "Everything's fine. I'll talk to you tomorrow." After hanging up, I sat in my chair and stared at the ceiling. My wife worked for a company I owned. She was having an affair with someone in that company, most likely her boss, Gregory Weston. She'd just lied to me about her whereabouts and was probably with him right now. The irony was almost poetic. I opened my laptop and accessed the secure server where we kept sensitive corporate documents. It took me 20 minutes to navigate through the various holding companies and subsidiary relationships, but eventually, I found what I was looking for: the complete ownership chain that led from my personal trust to Weston Consulting Group. On paper, I owned 63% of the company where my wife worked. I controlled the board of directors, approved major personnel decisions, and had the authority to hire or fire anyone in the organization, including Gregory Weston, including my wife. The realization settled over me like a warm blanket. For months, I'd felt powerless, watching my marriage disintegrate while Celeste became increasingly bold in her deception. But I wasn't powerless. I'd just forgotten how much power I actually had. My phone buzzed with another text from Celeste. "Staying at Sierra's tonight. She's had too much wine and needs someone to drive her to work tomorrow." 11:23 p.m. The lies were getting more elaborate. I set my phone aside and opened a new document on my laptop. At the top, I typed, "Strategic Assessment and Action Plan." Then I began to write. I didn't sleep that night. Instead, I sat in my office until dawn, mapping out the corporate structure that connected my various business interests. What I discovered was more extensive than I'd remembered. Ashford Holdings, my primary investment vehicle, controlled interests in 17 different companies. Some were direct acquisitions, others were partnerships or joint ventures. I'd been building this network for over a decade, always thinking about diversification and risk management. I'd never considered it as a weapon, but weapons were exactly what I needed now. At 6:30 a.m., I made coffee and called Margaret Sinclair. She answered on the second ring, which didn't surprise me. Margaret had been an early riser for as long as I'd known her. "Good morning, Nate. You're up early." "I've been thinking about our conversation yesterday, the Weston situation." Yes, that's becoming more complicated." "How so?" I heard the sound of papers being shuffled, then Margaret's voice became more formal. "I've been reviewing their personnel files as part of our compliance audit. There are some concerning patterns in their expense reports and time allocation records." "What kind of patterns?" "Extended lunches that coincide between certain employees, travel expenses that don't match submitted itineraries, conference registrations for events that were canceled or never existed." Margaret had a gift for making corporate malfeasance sound like a weather report. Calm, factual, and completely devastating. "Which employees?" "Gregory Weston and Celeste Ashford, primarily, though there are a few others who show similar irregularities." My wife's name spoken in the context of an HR investigation felt surreal, like hearing your own house address mentioned in a news report about a crime. "What's your recommendation?" "Formally, we need to conduct individual interviews with all affected employees to clarify these discrepancies. The irregularities might be innocent, but we have a fiduciary responsibility to investigate." "And informally?" Margaret paused. "Informally, I think you should be prepared for some uncomfortable revelations." "I see. How long would this investigation take?" 2 weeks for the preliminary review, another week for individual interviews. After that, it depends on what we find. "And during this investigation, what happens to the employees involved?" "Standard procedure would be administrative leave pending resolution. We can't have people working in positions of trust while their conduct is under review." Administrative leave, a corporate euphemism for suspension without pay. For someone like Gregory Weston, who lived beyond his means and carried significant debt, it would be financially devastating. "Margaret, I want you to proceed with the investigation, but I want it done quietly and thoroughly." "Of course." "Nate, there's something else you should know." "What's that?" I ran a preliminary background check on Gregory Weston as part of the review. He has some concerning financial obligations, significant credit card debt, a mortgage that's underwater, and what appears to be a gambling problem. Gambling? Regular trips to the casino, large cash withdrawals, and at least 3 loans from payday advance companies. The man is drowning in debt. This information hit me like a physical blow, not because I was surprised by Gregory's financial problems, but because it explained so much about Celeste's recent behavior. Her new clothes, her expensive dinners, her sudden interest in investing our money in various schemes I'd rejected. She wasn't just having an affair. She was being used by someone who needed access to money he didn't have. Margaret, I want you to expedite this investigation, and I want you to be especially thorough in documenting any financial irregularities. Understood. I'll have a preliminary report by Friday. Good. And Margaret? I want this kept completely confidential until we're ready to act. Of course. Is there anything else? Yes. I want you to prepare termination paperwork for Gregory Weston. Don't file it yet, just have it ready. On what grounds? Violation of company policy regarding expense reporting and conflicts of interest. You'll have plenty of documentation once the investigation is complete. I'll prepare the paperwork today. After hanging up with Margaret, I showered and dressed for work. In the mirror, I looked the same as always, 43 years old, graying at the temples, the kind of face that belonged in a corporate boardroom or on a construction site. But something had changed overnight. There was a hardness in my eyes that hadn't been there before. Downstairs, I found Kara eating cereal at the kitchen counter while scrolling through her phone. Morning, Dad. Mom's not back yet. She stayed at Sierra's last night. Uh-huh. Kara's tone suggested she found this as believable as I did. Where's your brother? Already left for school. He had some computer club meeting. I poured coffee and sat down next to her. Kara, I want you to know that whatever happens between your mother and me, it has nothing to do with you or Benji. You're the best things that ever happened to me. She looked up from her phone, studying my face with the intensity she usually reserved for math problems. Dad, are you okay? I'm fine. Just wanted you to know that. You're acting weird. Different weird than Mom, but still weird. How am I acting weird? You're too calm. Usually when Mom stays out all night, you pace around the kitchen and check your phone every 5 minutes. Today you're just sitting there like nothing happened. My daughter, the behavioral analyst. She was right, of course. I was different today. Yesterday I'd been reacting to events, trying to understand what was happening to my marriage. Today, I was planning. Maybe I'm just tired of pacing. Or maybe you figured something out. I studied her face, wondering how much she actually knew or suspected. What makes you say that? Because you get this look when you solve problems. Like when you figured out why the electrical system was acting up in the garage, or when you restructured the company's debt. You get really quiet and focused. And I have that look now? Yeah, it's kind of scary, actually. I reached over and squeezed her shoulder. Don't be scared. Everything's going to be fine. Promise? I promise. She seemed satisfied with this and returned to her cereal. I finished my coffee and gathered my things for work. Dad? Yeah? When you solve this problem, try not to be too mean to Mom. She's still our mother. The request hit me harder than I'd expected. Even knowing what Celeste was doing, even feeling the anger and betrayal burning in my chest, my daughter was asking me to show mercy. I'll remember that. The drive to my office gave me time to think about Kara's words. She was right to be concerned. The plan forming in my mind was comprehensive and devastating. By the time I was finished, Celeste and Gregory would be professionally ruined, socially humiliated, and financially destroyed. But they were also the mother of my children, and a man with his own family to support. I pulled into my parking space and sat in the car for a moment, weighing justice against mercy. Then I thought about Celeste's words from the night before. If you were a real man, you wouldn't question where I go. Real men, apparently, were supposed to be blind, deaf, and stupid. I got out of the car and walked into my building. My office occupied the top floor of a converted warehouse in the industrial district. We'd renovated it 5 years ago, creating a space that was both functional and impressive. Floor-to-ceiling windows overlooked the city, while exposed brick walls and polished concrete floors gave it an urban sophistication that clients seemed to appreciate. Douglas was already at his desk when I arrived, surrounded by legal briefs and financial reports. He looked up when I entered. "Morning. You look like hell." "Didn't sleep much." "The Weston situation?" "Among other things." I settled into my chair and turned on my computer. 3 new emails from job sites, one from a potential client, and a message from our insurance company about policy renewals. Normal business, the kind of problems that seemed simple compared to my personal situation. "Douglas, I need you to prepare some additional documentation." "What kind of documentation?" "I want a complete ownership disclosure for all our subsidiary companies, every shell corporation, every holding company, every partnership agreement. I want it organized so that even a lawyer could understand it." Douglas raised an eyebrow. "That's going to be a lot of paperwork. Any particular reason for the sudden transparency?" "Let's just say I want to make sure all our business relationships are properly documented." "This wouldn't have anything to do with your wife working for Weston, would it?" I met his gaze steadily. "It might." "Nate, I've been your partner for 8 years. I've never seen you make a business decision based on personal considerations." "I'm not making a business decision. I'm making a personal decision that happens to involve business assets." Douglas leaned back in his chair, processing this distinction. "What exactly are you planning?" "I'm planning to remind some people that actions have consequences." That sounds ominous. It's meant to. My phone buzzed with a text from Celeste. "Running errands today. Won't be home until late. Can you pick up the kids from school?" I showed the message to Douglas. "She's not running errands." "How do you know?" "Because I know my wife. She's covering her tracks for another afternoon with Gregory Weston." "The same Gregory Weston whose termination paperwork Margaret is preparing?" "The very same." Douglas was quiet for a long moment. Then he opened his laptop and began typing. "I'll have the ownership documentation ready by this afternoon. Thank you." "Nate?" "Yeah?" "Whatever you're planning, make sure it's legal." "It will be, but legal doesn't necessarily mean gentle." I spent the morning reviewing project reports and returning client calls, but my mind kept drifting to the plan taking shape in my head. By lunchtime, I had the basic framework mapped out. Phase 1. Investigation and documentation. Margaret would handle this, building an airtight case for Gregory's termination while documenting Celeste's involvement. Phase 2. Strategic disclosure. Douglas would prepare the ownership documentation, making it clear that I controlled Weston Consulting Group and had the authority to make personnel decisions. Phase 3. Execution. Gregory would be terminated for cause, Celeste would face disciplinary action, and both would be professionally blacklisted. It was elegant in its simplicity and devastating in its thoroughness. My phone rang. The caller ID showed Celeste's name. "Hello?" "Nate, I need to ask you something." Her voice sounded strained, almost nervous. "What's that?" "Have you been checking up on me?" The question caught me off guard. "What do you mean?" "I mean, have you been calling restaurants to verify where I've been, or asking Sierra and Tara about our plans, or anything like that?" "Why would you ask?" "Because Sierra got a weird call this morning from someone claiming to be conducting a customer satisfaction survey about Chez Laurent. They asked specific questions about whether she'd been there last night and who she was with." Interesting. I hadn't made any such call, which meant someone else was investigating Celeste's activities. Probably a private investigator hired by Gregory's wife, or possibly someone from our HR department conducting their own informal inquiry. I haven't called anyone, Celeste. Maybe it was a legitimate survey. Maybe. She didn't sound convinced. It just seemed odd. Where are you now? Shopping. I told you I was running errands. What kind of shopping? Just things for the house? Why? No reason, I was just curious. There it is again. The questioning. I thought we'd settled this. We did. I'm not questioning anything. I'm just making conversation. It doesn't feel like conversation. It feels like an interrogation. I could hear traffic in the background, along with what sounded like music, not the kind of environment you'd expect at a shopping center. Celeste, are you happy? The question seemed to surprise her as much as it surprised me. What kind of question is that? A simple one. Are you happy with our marriage, with our life together? I don't know why you're asking me this. Because I want to understand what's happening to us. Nothing's happening to us. You're just being paranoid and controlling. Am I? Yes. And it's pushing me away. I see. So if I were less paranoid and controlling, you'd be more present in our marriage? Probably. And if I stopped questioning where you go and what you do, you'd be more honest with me? I'm already honest with you. The lie came so easily that I almost admired her skill. Almost. Good to know. Well, I should let you get back to your shopping. Nate, are we okay? We're fine, Celeste. Everything's fine. You sound different. Different how? I don't know. Just different. Maybe I'm evolving. Into what? A real man, apparently. The silence stretched between us like a chasm. Finally, Celeste spoke. I'll see you tonight. Will you? What's that supposed to mean? Nothing. Just wondering if you'll actually be home tonight or if you'll find another friend who needs your help. I'll be home. Good. We should talk. About what? About our future. After she hung up, I sat staring at my phone. The conversation had confirmed what I already knew. Celeste was lying. She felt no remorse about it, and she had no intention of stopping, which meant I had no reason to stop either. I called Margaret Sinclair. Margaret, it's Nate. How's the investigation progressing? Faster than expected. I've found some very interesting information. Such as? Gregory Weston has been using company credit cards for personal expenses. Dinners at expensive restaurants, hotel rooms that don't correspond to business travel, and what appear to be gifts charged to the office supplies budget. Gifts? Jewelry, flowers, lingerie, all purchased with company funds and delivered to various addresses around the city. Including my address? I'm afraid so. A necklace from Tiffany delivered to your home address last week. The receipt shows it was charged to the marketing budget as a client appreciation gift. The necklace Celeste had been wearing to her girls' nights out. The one she'd claimed was a gift from her sister. What else? Hotel receipts for rooms booked during normal business hours. Always the same hotel, always the same type of suite. The pattern suggests regular meetings that have nothing to do with business. How regular? 3 times a week for the past 4 months. Always between noon and 3 p.m. Always charged to the training and development budget. Is Celeste's name on any of these receipts? Not directly. But the hotel has security cameras, and I've requested footage from several dates. It should arrive tomorrow. Margaret, you're being very thorough. I take corporate fraud seriously, Nate. This isn't just about expense account abuse. Gregory Weston has been stealing from the company to fund an extramarital affair. That's grounds for immediate termination and possible criminal charges. Criminal charges. I hadn't considered that possibility, but Margaret was right. Using company funds for personal expenses was embezzlement, regardless of the amounts involved. What's your recommendation? Terminate him immediately. Demand restitution for all misappropriated funds, and consider referring the matter to law enforcement. And what about Celeste? That's more complicated. She's not directly involved in the financial fraud, but she's clearly a beneficiary of it. At minimum, she could face disciplinary action for accepting gifts that were purchased with stolen funds. What kind of disciplinary action? Suspension, demotion, or termination, depending on how much she knew about the source of the gifts. And if she knew everything? Then she's an accessory to embezzlement. I thanked Margaret and hung up, then sat back in my chair to process what I'd learned. Gregory hadn't just been having an affair with my wife, he'd been stealing from my company to pay for it. The hotel rooms, the expensive dinners, the jewelry, all of it funded by corporate theft. The irony was perfect. Gregory had been using my own money to seduce my wife. My phone buzzed with a text from Benji. "Dad, can I stay after school for coding club? We're working on the location tracking project." I texted back, "Sure, I'll pick you up at 5. Then I called Douglas into my office. "I need you to prepare some additional paperwork." "More ownership disclosures?" "No, I want you to draft a formal complaint for embezzlement and corporate fraud." Douglas sat down heavily. "Against Gregory Weston?" "Against Gregory Weston." "Nate, are you sure about this? Criminal charges are serious business." "So is stealing from my company to fund an affair with my wife." "Fair point. What kind of evidence do we have?" I summarized Margaret's findings, watching Douglas's expression grow more serious with each detail. "That's actually a pretty strong case," he admitted. "The credit card records alone would be enough for criminal charges, and if we have hotel receipts and security footage, it becomes ironclad." "How long would it take to prepare the complaint?" "A day or two. But Nate, once we file criminal charges, there's no going back. This becomes a matter of public record." "Good. Your wife's name is going to come up in the investigation. She'll be questioned by police, possibly called as a witness. Are you prepared for that?" I thought about Celeste's words from the night before, her casual dismissal of my concerns, her weaponization of masculinity to shut down legitimate questions about her behavior. "I'm prepared." "And your kids? How are you going to explain this to them?" "I'll tell them the truth. Their mother made some bad choices, and now there are consequences." Douglas nodded slowly. "All right, I'll prepare the paperwork. But I want you to think about this overnight. Once we pull this trigger, everything changes." "Everything's already changed, Douglas. I'm just making it official." That afternoon, I picked up Benji from school and listened to him explain his location tracking project. The irony wasn't lost on me. While my son was learning to monitor digital footprints for a school assignment, I was using corporate surveillance to track my wife's infidelity. "Dad, can I ask you something?" "Sure." "If someone was lying to you about where they were going, would it be wrong to use technology to find out the truth?" The question was so perfectly timed that I wondered if he somehow knew about my situation. "That depends on the circumstances. Why do you ask?" "Just something I've been thinking about. Like, if you had good reasons to suspect someone was lying, and the lying was hurting people you cared about, wouldn't you have a responsibility to find out the truth?" That's a very mature way to think about it. So it wouldn't be wrong? Not if the lying was causing harm to innocent people. Benji nodded thoughtfully. That's what I figured. When we got home, I found Celeste in the kitchen, preparing dinner with unusual enthusiasm. She'd changed into a dress I hadn't seen before and was humming while she cooked. "You're in a good mood," I observed. "I had a good day. Shopping was productive." "What did you buy?" "Just some things for the house, and I picked up a gift for your birthday next month." My birthday wasn't for 3 months, but I didn't correct her. That's thoughtful. I try to be. She moved around the kitchen with practiced efficiency, and for a moment I could almost pretend we were a normal family preparing for a normal dinner. But then I noticed the new necklace she was wearing, the one Gregory had purchased with company funds, and the illusion shattered. "That's a beautiful necklace." "Thank you. It was a gift from my sister." "Your sister has excellent taste." She does. The lie came so naturally that I wondered how many others I'd missed over the years. How many gifts, how many explanations, how many alibis had I accepted without question. During dinner, Celeste was more animated than she'd been in months. She asked about the kids' school projects, made jokes about her co-workers, and even suggested we plan a family vacation for the summer. It was a masterful performance, and it might have worked if I hadn't known what I knew. After the kids went upstairs to do homework, Celeste and I sat in the living room with glasses of wine. She'd chosen a bottle from our wedding collection, one we'd been saving for a special occasion. "This is nice," she said, curling up next to me on the couch. "It is. We should do this more often. Just relax together." "I'd like that." She rested her head on my shoulder, and I could smell her perfume mixed with the scent of her shampoo. For 16 years, these had been the most comforting smells in my world. "Nate, I want you to know that I love you." The words should have made me happy. Instead, they felt like another lie in an evening full of them. "I love you too. I know I've been distant lately. Work has been stressful, and I've been dealing with some personal stuff." "What kind of personal stuff?" "Just things with my family. You know how complicated my mother can be." Her mother lived in Florida, and they spoke maybe twice a year. If Celeste was dealing with family stress, it wasn't coming from that direction. "Do you want to talk about it?" "Not really. I just want to focus on us tonight." "Okay." We sat in comfortable silence for a while, watching the fire crackle in the fireplace. It felt like old times, back when we were young and in love, and thought we could handle anything life threw at us. "Nate?" "Yeah?" "If something happened to us, to our marriage, you'd fight for it, wouldn't you?" The question caught me off guard. "What do you mean?" "I mean you wouldn't just give up. You'd try to work things out." "Are you planning to give me a reason to fight?" "No. I just want to know that you'd try." "Of course I'd try. This is our family, Celeste. It's worth fighting for." "Good. I'm glad to hear that." She kissed my cheek and went upstairs to bed, leaving me alone with my wine and my thoughts. I sat there until midnight, staring at the fire and thinking about her words. She'd asked if I would fight for our marriage, and I'd said yes. But she'd misunderstood what fighting meant. I wasn't going to fight to save our marriage. I was going to fight to win. Margaret called me at 7 a.m. with news that changed everything. "Nate, I have the hotel security footage." "And?" "It's worse than we thought. Gregory and Celeste have been meeting at the Riverside Hotel 3 times a week for 4 months. But that's not the worst part." I was already dressed for work, but I sat down heavily in my kitchen chair. "What's the worst part?" "They're not alone. There's a third person involved, Sierra Martinez from their department. This isn't just an affair, it's a conspiracy." "Sierra?" "Celeste's supposed best friend. The one who'd allegedly needed a designated driver last night. The one who'd received the mysterious phone call about restaurant surveys." "What kind of conspiracy?" "From what I can piece together from the expense reports and email records, they've been planning to leave Weston Consulting and start their own firm. They've been using company resources to identify clients, steal proprietary information, and fund their planning meetings. That's corporate espionage. It gets worse. I found email drafts on Gregory's computer that suggest they were planning to frame you for financial irregularities at Weston. Make it look like you were embezzling funds through the holding company structure." My coffee mug slipped from my hand and shattered on the kitchen floor. The sound brought Kara running downstairs. "Dad, are you okay?" "I'm fine, just clumsy." She looked at the broken ceramic and spilled coffee, then at my face. "You don't look fine." "Margaret, I need to call you back." I helped Kara clean up the mess while my mind raced through the implications of what I'd just learned. Gregory and Celeste weren't just having an affair, they were planning to destroy me professionally and financially. They wanted to steal my clients, ruin my reputation, and leave me holding the bag for their crimes. The sheer audacity of it was breathtaking. After Kara left for school, I called Margaret back. "Tell me everything." "I've been analyzing their digital communications for the past week. Gregory, Celeste, and Sierra have been using encrypted messaging apps to coordinate their activities. But Gregory made a mistake. He backed up his phone to the company server, and I was able to recover the deleted messages." "What do the messages say?" "They've identified 12 major clients they plan to poach when they leave. They've been copying client files, contract details, and pricing information. And they've been planning to time their departure with a public accusation that you've been mismanaging company funds." "Based on what evidence?" "False evidence. They've been creating fake invoices and doctored financial records that make it look like you've been siphoning money through shell companies. The plan was to present this information to the board of directors and demand your removal as majority shareholder." I felt something cold and hard settle in my stomach. "When were they planning to do this?" "Next week. There's a board meeting scheduled for Friday, and according to their messages, that's when they were going to make their move." "Do they have any idea that I know about their plan?" "I don't think so. But Nate, we need to act fast. If they present their false evidence to the board before we can expose their fraud, it could cause serious problems." "What do you recommend?" "We accelerate our timeline. I want to terminate Gregory today and place Celeste and Sierra on administrative leave pending investigation. Then we present all our evidence to the board and let them decide how to proceed." "Do it! Are you sure? This is going to create a lot of chaos." "Margaret, they were planning to frame me for embezzlement and steal my company. I'm not worried about creating chaos." "Understood. I'll prepare the termination paperwork and schedule individual meetings with all three of them. Can you be here by 10? "I'll be there." I hung up and immediately called Douglas. "We need to move up our timeline." "What happened?" I explained Margaret's discoveries, watching Douglas's expression grow more serious with each detail. "Holy hell, Nate. They were planning a corporate coup, complete with false evidence and media manipulation. Margaret found draft press releases accusing me of fraud. This is way beyond an affair. This is organized crime. Which is why we're going to crush them. What do you need from me?" "I want you to contact the FBI. Corporate espionage and conspiracy to commit fraud are federal crimes. I want these people prosecuted to the fullest extent of the law. That's going to make this very public, very quickly." "Good. I want everyone to know what they tried to do." Douglas nodded grimly. "I'll make the calls. But Nate, you need to prepare yourself for what comes next. This is going to be a media circus. Let it be a circus, as long as I'm the ringmaster." At 10 a.m., I walked into the Weston Consulting Group offices for the first time in over a year. The building was modern and sleek, with glass walls and open-concept workspaces that projected an image of transparency and collaboration. The irony wasn't lost on me. Margaret met me in the lobby, carrying a thick folder of documents. "Gregory is in conference room A. Celeste and Sierra are in separate offices, unaware of what's happening. Let's start with Gregory." Conference room A had floor-to-ceiling windows that overlooked the city. Gregory Weston sat at the polished table, looking confused and slightly annoyed. He was a handsome man in his mid-40s, with the kind of polished appearance that suggested expensive grooming and regular gym visits. He looked up when I entered, and his confusion deepened. "Nate? What are you doing here?" "Hello, Gregory. We need to talk." Margaret closed the door behind us and activated the room's recording system. "This meeting is being recorded for legal purposes." "Legal purposes?" Gregory's voice rose slightly. "What's going on?" I sat down across from him and opened Margaret's folder. "Gregory, are you familiar with the corporate structure of Weston Consulting Group?" "Of course I am. I'm the president." "And who do you think owns the company?" "The board of directors, obviously." "Wrong. I own 63% of Weston Consulting Group through a series of holding companies, which means I own this building, I own your office, and I own your job. The color drained from Gregory's face. That's impossible. Margaret, would you please provide Mr. Weston with the ownership documentation? Margaret slid a stack of papers across the table. Gregory's hands shook slightly as he flipped through them. This can't be legal. It's completely legal, and it means that every decision you've made as president of this company has been subject to my approval, including personnel decisions. What does this have to do with anything? It has to do with the fact that you've been embezzling company funds to pay for an affair with my wife. Gregory's mouth opened and closed like a fish out of water. I don't know what you're talking about. Hotel receipts, credit card statements, security footage. We have documentation of every meeting, every dinner, every gift you purchased with stolen money. Margaret slid another stack of papers across the table. These are copies of your expense reports for the past 6 months. Would you like to explain why you charged a Tiffany necklace to the marketing budget? That was a legitimate business expense. For a necklace delivered to Nate's home address? Margaret's voice was perfectly calm. What kind of business were you conducting with your boss's wife? Gregory's composure cracked completely. Look, I can explain everything. Please do. Celeste and I, we fell in love. It wasn't planned, it just happened. And yes, I used company funds for some personal expenses, but I was planning to pay it back. With what money? I asked. According to our financial investigation, you're drowning in debt. Gambling debts, specifically. How do you know about that? Because I own the company, Gregory. I know everything. He slumped in his chair, the fight going out of him. What do you want? I want you to admit that you've been stealing from my company to fund an affair with my wife. Yes. I want you to admit that you, Celeste, and Sierra Martinez have been planning to steal proprietary information and start a competing firm. Gregory's eyes widened. How did you... Is that an admission? Yes. And I want you to admit that you were planning to frame me for embezzlement to cover your tracks. That wasn't my idea. That was Celeste's plan. The words hung in the air like a toxic cloud. My wife, the mother of my children, had been planning to destroy me professionally and financially. Thank you for your honesty, Gregory. Margaret, please provide Mr. Weston with his termination paperwork. Termination? But I just admitted everything. I thought we could work something out. We are working something out. You're fired, effective immediately. Security will escort you from the building. You have 15 minutes to clean out your personal belongings. What about the embezzlement charges? What about them? Are you going to press charges? I pretended to consider this. That depends on how cooperative you are during the investigation. I'll cooperate completely. Good. Then maybe we can avoid criminal prosecution. But Gregory? Yes? If you ever contact my wife again, if you ever set foot on any property I own, if you ever breathe a word about this company's business to anyone, I will destroy you so completely that you'll wish you'd never been born. Gregory nodded frantically. I understand. I hope you do. Security escorted Gregory from the building while Margaret and I prepared for the next phase. Watching him walk past the windows with his cardboard box of personal belongings, I felt a grim satisfaction. 1 down, 2 to go. Are you ready for Celeste? Margaret asked. More than ready. Conference room B was identical to conference room A, but somehow it felt different, knowing that my wife would be sitting across from me in a few minutes. Margaret had arranged for Celeste to be called to the meeting under the pretense of discussing her upcoming performance review. When Celeste walked in, she looked beautiful and confident. She'd worn one of her best suits and styled her hair perfectly. She was dressed for success, not knowing that her world was about to collapse. Nate? What are you doing here? Hello, Celeste. Please sit down. She looked between Margaret and me, confusion evident on her face. Is everything okay? Margaret said this was about my performance review. In a way, it is. I opened Margaret's folder and pulled out the hotel receipts. Celeste, do you recognize these? She glanced at the papers and her face went pale. I don't know what those are. They're receipts from the Riverside Hotel, room 412, booked 3 times a week for the past 4 months. Always between noon and 3 p.m., always charged to the company's training budget. I've never seen those before. Really? Because we have security footage of you entering and leaving that hotel room with Gregory Weston. Celeste's hands began to shake. Nate, I can explain. Please do. Gregory and we've been working on a special project, a confidential client proposal that required privacy. What kind of proposal requires a hotel room? It's complicated. Industrial espionage concerns, competitive intelligence. We needed somewhere secure to discuss sensitive information. The lie was so elaborate and so desperate that I almost felt sorry for her. Almost. Margaret, would you please show Celeste the security footage from last Tuesday? Margaret opened her laptop and turned it toward Celeste. The video showed her and Gregory entering the hotel room at 12:30 p.m. They were holding hands and kissing in the hallway. That's quite a passionate business meeting, I observed. Celeste stared at the screen, her face crumbling. Nate, I'm sorry. For what? For the affair, for lying to you, for everything. Are you sorry for planning to frame me for embezzlement? Her head snapped up. What? Gregory told us everything, Celeste. The plan to steal client information, start your own company, and destroy my reputation with false evidence. That wasn't my idea. Whose idea was it? It was Gregory's plan. He said we needed to discredit you to protect ourselves when we left the company. Protect yourselves from what? From lawsuits, from non-compete clauses. Gregory said if we could prove you were corrupt, it would invalidate our employment contracts. I looked at Margaret, who was taking detailed notes. And you agreed to this plan? I didn't have a choice. Gregory said it was the only way we could be together. So, you were willing to destroy your husband's career and reputation for a man who was stealing money to pay for your affair? Celeste began to cry. I never meant for it to go this far. How far did you mean for it to go? I just wanted to be happy. Our marriage was falling apart, Nate. We barely talked anymore. We never did anything together. Gregory made me feel like myself again. So you decided to commit corporate espionage and fraud? I made mistakes, terrible mistakes, but I never wanted to hurt you. You just wanted to frame me for embezzlement and steal my company. That was Gregory's idea. But you went along with it. She nodded miserably. Yes. Margaret, please provide Celeste with her termination paperwork. Termination? Celeste's voice was barely a whisper. You're fired, Celeste, effective immediately. You're also banned from entering any property owned by Ashford Holdings or its subsidiaries. You can't do this. I have rights. You have the right to remain silent when the FBI interviews you about the conspiracy charges. FBI? Corporate espionage is a federal crime, Celeste. So is conspiracy to commit fraud. Gregory has already agreed to cooperate with the investigation. What does that mean for me? That depends on how cooperative you are. She looked at me with desperate eyes. What do you want me to do? I want you to provide a complete written confession detailing your role in the conspiracy. I want you to turn over all stolen client information and proprietary documents. And I want you to testify against Sierra Martinez. And if I do all that, then maybe we can work out a plea agreement that keeps you out of federal prison. And our marriage? I looked at this woman I'd loved for 16 years, the mother of my children, the person I'd trusted above all others. She'd betrayed me in every possible way, and now she was asking about our marriage. Our marriage ended the moment you decided to destroy me, Celeste. Everything else is just paperwork. She broke down completely then, sobbing into her hands while Margaret and I watched in silence. Part of me wanted to comfort her, to tell her everything would be okay, but a larger part of me felt nothing but cold satisfaction. Security will escort you from the building, I said. You have 15 minutes to collect your personal belongings. Nate, please, think about the children. I am thinking about the children. That's why I'm making sure their mother doesn't go to federal prison. After Celeste was escorted out, Margaret and I took a short break. I stood at the conference room window, watching employees in the parking lot pointing and whispering as news of the terminations spread through the building. "How are you holding up?" Margaret asked. "Better than expected. This can't be easy, watching your marriage implode in a corporate conference room. The marriage imploded months ago. This is just the cleanup. What about Sierra Martinez? What about her? She's still here, still working, still unaware that her co-conspirators have been terminated and are cooperating with law enforcement." I turned away from the window. "Then let's go educate her." Sierra Martinez was in her office when we arrived, typing frantically on her computer. She looked up when we entered, and I could see the panic in her eyes. "Sierra, we need to talk." "I'm very busy right now. Can this wait?" "I'm afraid not." Margaret closed the door and activated her recording device. "This meeting is being recorded for legal purposes." Sierra's fingers hovered over her keyboard. "What's going on?" "Gregory Weston and Celeste Ashford have been terminated for embezzlement and corporate espionage. They've both confessed to their crimes and implicated you as a co-conspirator." Sierra's face went white. "I don't know what you're talking about." "Really? Because we have encrypted messages between the three of you discussing plans to steal client information and start a competing firm." "Those messages were taken out of context." "Were they?" "Because Gregory and Celeste seemed to remember them quite clearly." Sierra stood up abruptly. "I want to call my lawyer." "That's your right. But I should mention that Gregory and Celeste are both cooperating with the FBI investigation. The first person to provide information usually gets the best plea deal." "FBI? Corporate espionage is a federal crime, Sierra. So is conspiracy to commit fraud. You're looking at 5 to 10 years in federal prison." She sat down heavily, her hands shaking. "What do you want from me?" "The same thing I wanted from Gregory and Celeste. A complete confession, full cooperation with the investigation, and the return of all stolen information." "And if I cooperate? Then maybe we can work something out." Sierra stared at her computer screen for a long moment, then began typing. "I'm deleting the client files we copied." "Don't bother. We've already imaged your hard drive. The evidence is preserved." She stopped typing and looked at me with defeated eyes. "You really do own this company." "I really do." "And you're really going to prosecute us?" "That depends on how this conversation goes." Sierra took a deep breath. "What do you want to know?" For the next hour, Sierra provided a detailed account of the conspiracy. She confirmed everything Gregory and Celeste had told us, and added several details they'd omitted. By the time we finished, we had enough evidence to prosecute all three of them for multiple federal crimes. "Margaret, please prepare Sierra's termination paperwork." "Already done." Margaret slid the papers across Sierra's desk. "What happens now?" Sierra asked. "Now you go home and wait for the FBI to contact you. I suggest you hire a very good lawyer." "And my job?" "You no longer have a job. You're terminated for cause, effective immediately." As security escorted Sierra from the building, I felt a profound sense of completion. In less than 4 hours, I dismantled the conspiracy that threatened to destroy me and eliminated the people who'd betrayed my trust. But I wasn't finished yet. I called Douglas from my car. "It's done. All three have been terminated and have confessed to their crimes. How do you feel?" "Like I'm just getting started." "What's next?" "Now we make sure everyone knows what they tried to do." Meaning I'm going to hold a press conference." "Nate, are you sure that's wise? This is going to be a media circus." "Douglas, my wife tried to frame me for embezzlement and steal my company. I think a little media attention is exactly what this situation needs. What are you going to tell the press?" "The truth. that I uncovered a conspiracy to commit corporate espionage and fraud, that the perpetrators have been terminated and are cooperating with federal law enforcement, and that Ashford Holdings will continue to operate with the highest standards of integrity and transparency. And your personal situation? What about it? Are you going to mention that one of the conspirators was your wife? I thought about this for a moment. Only if someone asks directly. They will ask. Then I'll tell them that even family members are held accountable for criminal behavior. That's going to be a hell of a quote. It's going to be a hell of a day. When I got home that evening, I found Kara and Benji waiting in the living room. They looked worried and confused, which was understandable given that their mother had been escorted from her workplace by security guards. "Dad, what happened to Mom?" Kara asked. I sat down between them on the couch. "Your mother made some very bad choices at work. She got involved in some illegal activities and had to be fired." "What kind of illegal activities?" Benji asked. "She was stealing information from her company and planning to use it to start her own business. She was also having an affair with her boss." The words hung in the air like a toxic cloud. I watched my children process this information, seeing their faces change as they understood the implications. "So she was cheating on you?" Kara's voice was barely a whisper. "Yes." "And stealing from her job?" "Yes." "Is she going to jail?" Benji asked. "I don't know. That depends on what the FBI decides to do." "FBI?" Kara's eyes widened. "Corporate espionage is a federal crime. The FBI investigates those cases." My children sat in stunned silence, trying to process the fact that their mother was a criminal. Finally, Kara spoke. "Dad, are you okay?" "I'm fine." "You don't look fine." "I'm angry and disappointed, but I'm not surprised. I've known something was wrong for months." "Is that why you've been acting different?" Benji asked. "Probably." "Are you and Mom getting divorced?" "Yes." "Good," Kara said firmly. "She doesn't deserve you." Her words hit me harder than I'd expected. My 13-year-old daughter had just given me permission to end my marriage. "Thank you for saying that." "It's true. Mom's been horrible to you for months. We've seen how she treats you." "And now we know why," Benji added. "She was guilty and trying to make you the bad guy." My children, the accidental psychologists, they'd seen through Celeste's behavior more clearly than I had. "What happens now?" Kara asked. "Now we figure out how to move forward as a family. Just the three of us." "Will we have to move?" "No. This is our home. Your mother will have to find somewhere else to live." "Good. I like our house." "Me too." That night, after the kids went to bed, I sat in my office and drafted a press release announcing the investigation and terminations at Weston Consulting Group. I kept it factual and professional, focusing on the corporate crimes rather than the personal betrayals. But I made sure to include one particular detail, that the investigation had uncovered evidence of conspiracy and fraud that would be referred to federal law enforcement for prosecution. Tomorrow, the whole world would know what Celeste, Gregory, and Sierra had tried to do, and they would know that I had stopped them. I leaned back in my chair and smiled for the first time in months. My wife had said that real men don't question where their wives go. She was wrong. Real men ask questions, investigate answers, and take action when they discover the truth. Real men protect what matters to them. Real men win. The press conference was scheduled for 10 a.m. By 9:30, the lobby of our office building was packed with reporters, cameras, and curious onlookers. Douglas stood beside me as I reviewed my prepared statement one final time. "You ready for this?" he asked. "I've been ready for months." "Remember, stick to the facts. Don't let them bait you into emotional responses." "I won't. And if they ask about Celeste, I'll tell them the truth." We walked into the conference room that had been set up for the press conference. The lights were blindingly bright, and the noise level dropped to 0 as I approached the podium. Good morning. My name is Nathaniel Ashford, and I'm the majority owner of Weston Consulting Group. I'm here to announce that we have uncovered evidence of a conspiracy to commit corporate espionage and fraud within our organization. I paused, letting the gravity of the statement sink in. 3 employees, Gregory Weston, Celeste Ashford, and Sierra Martinez, have been terminated for cause after an internal investigation revealed that they were stealing proprietary information, embezzling company funds, and planning to use this information to start a competing business. A reporter raised her hand. Mr. Ashford, did you say Celeste Ashford? Is that a relation? Celeste Ashford is my wife. The room erupted in whispers and camera flashes. I waited for quiet before continuing. All 3 individuals have confessed to their crimes and are cooperating with federal law enforcement. The matter has been referred to the FBI for investigation and possible prosecution. Mr. Ashford, how did you discover this conspiracy? Through routine compliance auditing. We noticed irregularities in expense reports and began investigating. What kind of irregularities? Company credit cards being used for personal expenses, hotel rooms booked during business hours that didn't correspond to legitimate business activities, gifts and entertainment expenses that couldn't be justified. Mr. Ashford, how do you feel about your wife's involvement in this conspiracy? The question I'd been expecting. I looked directly into the camera. I'm disappointed but not surprised. When someone chooses to engage in criminal behavior, they face the consequences regardless of their personal relationships. No one is above the law, including family members. Are you planning to divorce your wife? That's a personal matter that I won't discuss publicly. Mr. Ashford, what's the estimated value of the information that was stolen? Our preliminary assessment suggests several $1 million in proprietary client data and competitive intelligence. Will this affect Weston Consulting Group's operations? Not at all. We've implemented additional security measures and are confident in our ability to serve our clients without interruption. Mr. Ashford, do you think your wife's actions were motivated by your marriage problems? Another direct hit. I paused, considering my response. I think my wife's actions were motivated by greed and poor judgment. Personal problems don't justify criminal behavior. Have you spoken to your wife since her termination? No. Do you plan to? That will depend on the advice of my attorney. I took a few more questions, then concluded the press conference. As I walked away from the podium, I felt a profound sense of closure. The world now knew what Celeste had done, and there would be no way for her to spin the narrative in her favor. My phone was buzzing with calls and text messages before I even reached my office. News outlets, former colleagues, friends, and family members who'd seen the press conference. I ignored them all except one, a call from my lawyer. Nate, I just watched your press conference. We need to talk. What's the problem? No problem. I just want to make sure you understand the implications of what you've done. Which are, you've made it impossible for Celeste to claim she was coerced or manipulated. By publicly stating that she confessed and is cooperating with law enforcement, you've essentially forced her to maintain that position. Good. It also means that any divorce proceedings will be heavily influenced by her criminal behavior. Adultery, theft, conspiracy. These are all factors that will work in your favor in custody and property division. Even better, Nate, you've essentially guaranteed that you'll get everything you want in the divorce. That was the plan. I have to ask, was this all calculated? The investigation, the press conference, the public humiliation? I thought about the question. Had I planned all of this, or had I simply responded to events as they unfolded? I didn't plan for my wife to have an affair and try to frame me for embezzlement, but once I discovered what she was doing, yes, I planned my response very carefully. You've destroyed her completely. Professionally, socially, legally. She'll never recover from this. She destroyed herself. I just made sure everyone knew about it. Fair enough. What's next? Next, I go home to my children and start rebuilding our lives. And Celeste? Celeste can figure out her own life. She's a grown woman who made her own choices. That evening, I sat in my living room with Kara and Benji, watching the news coverage of the press conference. The story was the lead item on 3 local stations and had been picked up by several national outlets. "Dad, you looked really calm up there," Kara observed. I felt calm. Even when they asked about Mom? Especially then. Why? Because I was telling the truth. The truth is always easier than lies. "Is Mom going to be okay?" Benji asked. "Your mother is going to face the consequences of her actions, but she's smart and resourceful. She'll figure out how to move forward." "Do you still love her?" The question caught me off guard. I thought about it carefully before answering. I love the person she used to be, but that person doesn't exist anymore. That's sad. It is sad. But sometimes people change in ways that make it impossible to maintain a relationship with them. Will we still see her? That depends on what happens with the legal proceedings. If she's charged with federal crimes, she might not be available for visits. My children absorbed this information with the resilience that had always amazed me. They were handling their mother's downfall better than most adults would. "Dad?" "Yeah, Kara. I'm proud of you." "For what?" "For standing up for yourself. For not letting Mom get away with what she did." "Thank you. You're a real man," Benji added with a slight smile. I laughed despite everything. I guess I am. Later that night, after the kids were asleep, I sat in my office and reflected on the day's events. In less than 12 hours, I'd exposed a conspiracy, destroyed 3 careers, and ended my marriage. I'd gone from being a victim to being the victor. My phone rang. The caller ID showed Celeste's name. I answered on the 4th ring. "Hello, Celeste." "Nate, we need to talk." "I don't think we do. Please, just give me 5 minutes." "You have 5 minutes. I saw the press conference. You destroyed me." "You destroyed yourself. I just made it public." "Did you have to mention my name? Did you have to tell everyone I was your wife?" "They asked a direct question. I gave a direct answer." "You could have protected me. The way you protected me when you were planning to frame me for embezzlement?" She was quiet for a long moment. "I never wanted it to go that far. But you were willing to let it go that far." "I was scared. Gregory said it was the only way." "Gregory was using you, Celeste. He was stealing my money to pay for your affair, and when that wasn't enough, he convinced you to help him steal my company. I know that now. Do you? Because 3 hours ago you thought you were going to get away with it. What do you want from me, Nate? I want you to take responsibility for what you've done. I want you to cooperate with the FBI investigation, and I want you to stay away from my children until this legal mess is resolved. They're my children too. They're children whose mother is facing federal criminal charges. I'm not going to expose them to that chaos. This isn't over. Yes, it is. Your 5 minutes are up." I hung up and turned off my phone. Tomorrow would bring new challenges: FBI interviews, media attention, divorce proceedings. But tonight, I was content to sit in my office and savor the victory. My wife had said that real men don't question where their wives go. She was wrong about that. She was wrong about everything. I opened my laptop and began typing an email to my children's teachers, explaining that there might be some media attention around our family in the coming weeks. I wanted to make sure Kara and Benji were protected from any fallout at school. As I typed, I thought about the future. For the first time in months, it looked bright. I had my children, my business, and my self-respect. Celeste had none of those things. The scales had finally balanced. Justice, it turned out, tasted better than revenge.